Hello, I am Mate. I'm a prop firm trader. I currently have $1.8 million in funding and I've received over 6 figures in payouts. And in this video, I'll talk about my views on risk management. So first, we'll talk about the underlying principles of risk management. So we'll talk about the effect of position sizing and the two main constraints. After that, we'll talk about the 1% risk rule, what it is, why I think it's overrated and misunderstood. And then we'll talk about risk management for prop firms. So we'll talk about real account size and the risk of time. Let's start with the effect of position sizing. And I've made this Excel with 3 traders. So let's say they all take 1-to-1 risk to reward trades. One trader has a 70% win rate, so he's profitable. One has a 50% win rate, so he's break even. And one has a 40% win rate, so he's negative. And then for all those traders, I've calculated what their return would be if they risk 1, 2, 5, or 10% per trade. And what we see is for the profitable trader, he makes the most amount of money when he risks the most. So as you can see, if he risks 1%, he would make 4% over these 10 trades. If you risk 2%, he would make 8, and if you risk 10, he would make 42%. So for the profitable trader, the more he risks, the more he makes. If you take a break-even trader, it's the opposite, where if you risk 1%, you would be pretty much break-even, but if you risked more, you would always be more negative. And if you risk, for example, 10%, then you would be down 50% from 5 wins, 5 losses. And if you take a look at the negative trader, obviously, the less he risks, the less he loses. So he should risk as little as possible. So what does this mean? This means that contrary to popular belief, more risk equals more profit if you have an edge. So if you have an edge, the more you risk, the more you make. If you don't have an edge, obviously, the less you risk, the less you'll lose. So if you have an edge, more risk, more profit. If you don't have an edge, you shouldn't be trading at all, preferably, because you'll just lose money. So if more risk equals more profit, why shouldn't a profitable trader just risk 100% every single trade? There are 2 reasons for that. And the first one is you have to reduce your risk of ruin. The second one is you can't get emotional. So let's start with number 1, reducing the risk of ruin. When you lose all of your money, when you blow your account, it's game over. Your edge doesn't matter anymore. You've lost all your money. You're fucked. And when the risk of ruin, so the chance of you blowing your account, is too big, this can completely ruin your edge. So if we take this extreme example of a trader with a 50% win rate and an average risk to reward of 1 to 10. So obviously, this never happens in the real world, but let's just take this example of an extremely profitable trader. He has a massive edge. But if he were to risk 100% every single trade, then he would just lose his money every other trade and he wouldn't be able to actually make money. Even with this, with this massive edge that he has, he would still not be able to make money because his risk of ruin is too high. So that's number 1, why we have to keep our risk in check. And the second reason is to keep our emotions in check. It doesn't matter how big your edge is if you can't stick to your plan. So if you risk more than you're comfortable, you might be afraid and not take trades you should. You might be greedy, take trades you shouldn't. You might close early, move stop loss, move TP, whatever. You might just not stick to your plan and completely lose your edge. So in summary, the purpose of risk management is to optimize your gains, right? To make as much profit as possible while keeping the risk of ruin reasonable and while helping the trader control their emotions. Now let's talk about the 1% risk rule. So for those of you that don't know, the 1% risk rule is a best practice that says you should only risk 1% of your account balance per trade. And honestly, although it's just a simple best practice, this kind of made sense back when people were only trading personal accounts. Because if we take a look at this again, the purpose of risk management, then it's to optimize your gains. And obviously, with 1% risk, you can get significant gains while keeping your risk of ruin reasonable, which it does, and while helping the trader control their emotions. And for most traders, 1% keeps it low enough so that they don't really care if they win, if they lose, and they can just stick to their plan. So back in the day, for most traders, this was solid advice. But it's just the best practice. So for example, if you have a high win rate with a low risk to reward, and you can risk a little bit more than if you have, let's say, a low win rate with a high risk to reward. Even if they make the same amount of money, if they're as profitable, just because constantly getting small wins is way less emotionally draining than constantly stacking losses and then get a big win and constantly stacking losses. So, you might be able to risk a little bit more. For example, if you have a high win rate strat, compared to a low win rate one, even if you're making the same amount of money, just because the emotional drain is a little bit different. Another example could be the trader themselves. Are they risk averse? Then they should probably lower the risk. If they're risk seeking, they can probably increase it a bit. So obviously it's just a best practice, but when you understand the underlying principles, which I've just taught you, then you don't have to stick to the best practice and you can think for yourself and decide for yourself. And that's what I'm trying to do here. Now that we know about the 1% risk rule, let's talk about its misapplication in prop firm trading. And I see mainly two mistakes being made. The first one is people not understanding the real account size when it comes to prop trading. And the second one is people underestimating the risk of time. Let's start with the real account size, and the real account size of a prop firm funded account is the account balance times the max drawdown. So let's give an example. If you buy an account and you pass it, the balance is $100,000, your max drawdown is 10%, your real account size is $10,000, not the $100,000, because you can only lose $10,000. So if you risk $1,000, that's 1% of the balance, but it's 10% of the real account balance. So you're not risking 1%, you're risking 10% per trade. Another important distinction to make is the distinction between your account and your portfolio. So say you don't buy one account, but you buy 5 different $100,000 accounts. That means your portfolio balance is $500,000. So let's take once again the max drawdown of 10%. That means your real portfolio size is $50,000. So if you risk the same $1,000, that's 1% of the balance, 1% of $100,000. It's 10% of the real account balance, but it's only 2% of the real portfolio balance, right? Because you have your real portfolio size is $50,000, you risk $1,000, so that's only 2%. And the second thing people don't seem to understand when it comes to risk management for prop trading is the impact of time. So let's start off with the very basics, and that's the more you risk, the quicker you'll pass or fail a challenge. So if you risk 3% per trade, you'll either pass or fail more quickly than if you risk, say, 1 or 0.5%. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the impact of time. And the first thing I want to mention is the risk of a prop firm shutting down. So lately, a ton of firms have been shutting down, they have been going bankrupt, and honestly, no one knows which firm is next. So this means that if, for example, you take 6 months to reach a payout, there's a significant chance the prop firm would have shut down, completely changed their rules, or whatever. So you want to get your money out of the prop firm as quickly as possible. You don't want to wait multiple months because the chance of the prop firm shutting down over those months is actually pretty high right now. The next thing I want to touch on when it comes to time and prop firm trading is ROI versus profit. So I've made a quick example. Let's say you as a trader have two strategies. One low risk strategy where you risk 1% per trade, one high risk where you risk, for example, 3% per trade. With the low risk strategy, you pass 100% of your challenges, but you can only take one challenge per month. With the high risk strategy, you pass 66% of your challenges, but you can take up to 3. So you can pass 2 challenges every month, whilst with the lower strategy, you can only pass 1 challenge per month. And then let's say you just trade the funded account the same way, regardless of the strategy. So you trade the challenges differently, but the funded accounts the same. Then what this will mean for $100,000, for example, if we fill in the numbers, let's say an account costs $400, then you can see with a low risk strategy, you can only buy 1 challenge per month. So a cost of $400, you make 5K per account. So your cost is $400, your revenue is 5K. So you made 4.6K profit, an ROI of 11.5, which is obviously amazing. And now let's take a look at high risk strategy, where you can take more challenges, but the pass rate is a little lower. So you buy 3 challenges, so that means the cost is $1,200, but you're able to pass 2, make 5% on each, just like in the other example. So now your revenue is $10,000. So your profit is 8.8K, while in the other example it's only $4,600, but your ROI is way lower. But obviously, as a trader, you want to optimize profit and not ROI. So this is another argument to increase your risk, because although it might hurt your return on investment, the only thing that really matters is your profit. And the last thing I want to touch on when it comes to time is the compound effect. So obviously, the quicker you have your money back, the quicker you can reinvest it, so the higher the compounding effect. Once again, I've made a quick example. Let's say you have two options. You can either 2x your money every month, or you can 10x it every 4 months. A lot of people would choose for this one since the ROI seems higher, but that's actually not the case, because if you take a look, let's say they both start with $100, this guy at the end will have $1,000, while this guy will have $1,600. And the reason is because the compounding works way more quickly for this guy than it does for this guy. So to summarize, you want to get your money out of the prop firm as quickly as possible, because there's a real risk of the firm going under within the next couple of months. You want to emphasize profit over return on investment, even if this means increasing the risk a bit. And you want to get your money out of the prop firm as quickly as possible so that you can reinvest it as quickly as possible, and you can let the compounding effect do the heavy lifting for you.